Hi, I'm Brad, and I've been hyping up a technology for around 2 years now. OLED microdisplays, or micro OLED, or OLED on silicon. There's a lot of names for it because it's such a technology that's being kind of revived for military displays and put into consumer products starting, well, kind of like right now. Consumer VR products. And on my head, I've been wearing this headset because one, I think it's fashionable, but it's also the headset I've been using for quite a lot of period of time in the past 2 weeks. It is the BigScreen Beyond, and it comes from the company who's been working on this software to allow people to co-presence together and watch movies, licensed officially from, Hollywood and all that good stuff. And yeah, they kind of pivoted or sort of slightly pivoted to do hardware or PC VR hardware for Steam VR. I made a whole video talking about some early impressions I had going to their studio and sort of seeing early prototypes. But since then, I've been able to get this unit sent to me and use it pretty much full throttle for the past 2 or 3 weeks. Now, this is a preview unit. It is not the final thing that people who pre-order the device will get, but it's getting pretty close. And I don't expect too many changes, but we'll see. Now, disclaimer, as I said, they did send this unit to me. I paid $0 for it, but it is a loaner unit, so I will have to send it back at some point. They are not paying me to make this video, and they did offer an affiliate program, but I declined because I want my impressions to be as less worried about me getting kickbacks from it as I can. So let's continue with all that in mind. So just a quick recap on the specs that you will get from this headset. It sports 2 micro OLED displays running at up to 90 Hz with a resolution of 2560 by 2560 per eye. It uses pancake lenses and uses the SteamVR Lighthouse tracking system with the photodiodes and all that good stuff in there. So it only works if you have base stations such as the Vive Gen 1 or the Index base stations. All that you need those basically. Now, I first want to talk about my onboarding experience when I got the headset, sort of the different procedures I went through, the comfort value and everything. The first thing I want to talk about is once you get it, it comes in this nice box. It comes with the custom printed face mold that is literally you 3D scan your face with an iPhone or really a more recent iPhone with LiDAR Face ID support. And it just magnetically attaches to this headset. And you put it on and you see if it will fit. And when you do have a good fit, there is literally zero light leakage. Like, this is the least amount of light leakage I've ever experienced in any headset. Usually most headsets always have a little bit of light showing through the nose gasket or some other weird areas. The Quest Pro took that further by having a lot of light leakage, depending on whether you have the side panels in or not. But it is pretty impressive how much it actually blocks out. Now, there is some problems with that with the current generation of software using to do the Face ID scan, but we'll talk about that later in the video when I talk about optics. It uses a fiber optic cable, as you can see right here, and it's USB-C, and it goes directly into a link box, and it goes into there, and then it passes into a DisplayPort cable and 2 USB-Cs. Now, only one of those USB-Cs is actually doing data. The other one is plugged into another USB port, USB-A, to deliver even more power. I was told that you could even just use only one USB-A directly to the PC, and if you have some sort of either battery bank or a standardized low power wall plug, you could just plug that USB-A directly in there and it will work, which is probably important because power delivery might be an issue. Because the first day I did get this unit, I had an issue that some other users might report, and they're calling it RF interference. Now, while I do have the unit that sort of solves all those issues, my first day actually did still have some sort of interference or some sort of issues with the controllers directly connecting to my headset and getting all that data sent to my PC so it can track my controllers and accurately not let things drift away. Which was confusing because I went through all the steps, which you won't have to do if you buy this unit and it gets delivered to you at the consumer time, because they're actually removing those Watchman dongles from the link box and keeping it here anyway. So that was extra steps I had to go through. But I did actually fix it for me just by switching around some USB-A cables on the back of my motherboard. So either my motherboard was still giving some sort of weird RF interference, or I have some kind of feelings that maybe there's some ports on my motherboard that actually don't give enough power delivery that was needed to actually power every system on my headset to give enough power for the controllers to send that data through. So I swapped around USB-A ports and it worked. So that mention I said that you might want to plug in one of those cables into a little AC adapter, depending on what you have, might be useful if that is an actual issue. Now, there was another issue on my day one, and that's the fact that I have complained about this quite a bit, including my first big screen Beyond video, and the default version of this headset has a side strap that goes all around your head, which makes sense. I know why companies are constantly trying to do that. This headset is around 180 grams with the wire and everything, so people think, oh, I could wear it like a pair of glasses, no problem. There's a problem. It's just not comfortable, honestly. If you spend a lot of time in VR, you just want a top strap, and that's actually what I did. I grabbed some Velcro straps, and I actually wrapped it on the top of my head through the side, which alleviated mostly all the pressure off of my ears especially, which, again, a lot of the stuff is when this thing doesn't have a top strap, it just kind of rubs against your ears over time, and I was very pushy on that. I kept messaging the BigScreen team about it. And finally, they kind of caved, and they will be including a top strap that is the same material as this, but loops around, and you can optionally add it or remove it. So every person will get something similar to this that'll actually look better than my sort of strap that was just kind of put together with DIY parts. And it improved the experience and comfort for me 100 times over. Like I will keep pushing that egotistical rant quite a bit because it just really did help. And once I got everything in the right order, less pressure off of my nose, less pressure off my ears, I was able to use this thing for hours. And I mean hours, like. So let's get into talking about the comfort value in terms of like how this thing wears, how this thing looks, and let's just get into the meat and grit of things. Before this headset, I would full-time use an Index, which people know the Index is 4 years old at this point. In fact, when this video goes live, this video is going on the 4th anniversary when the Index was first announced, which is wild. And even though I had other headsets constantly come to me, including this is probably the most recent one that you can plug into a PC, there was always like one or a few problems that I just couldn't get over, and I would go back to using my Index, honestly. This headset, I have really no feelings to go back. Now, it doesn't mean this headset is perfect, far from it, but it is the first headset in a while where, as me, what I do in VR, a lot of social VR, a lot of just PC VR, a lot of tinkering and stuff with whatever I want to work on that week in VR, this was something that finally just felt like some sort of either side grade or upgrade for my Index. And the main reason was probably the comfort over everything. You sacrificed a lot of different specs to get this comfort level, and it kind of worked for me, honestly. I've always had this opinion that there was always a retention problem with VR. People buy headsets, they can subsidize things, they can do their best, but if people don't go back or want to go back to VR, whether it's just like they leave it in a closet forever or they just don't want to wear it, that was always an issue, right? Well, with this kind of headset, I actually think there's a new kind of retention problem. This headset makes me want to spend too much time in VR, to the point where I think it's an unhealthy level, and that's sort of praise, but it's actually started making me think about what kind of platform holders, if this medium does explode as people think it might, and people have full control of the ecosystems, everything, and all of what you do in these virtual worlds, it's kind of gave me a little bit of a fear factor. But for now, since I'm just doing it on a completely open platform on my PC, I have full control of what things I get to do. It's a great feeling to just want to be in VR all the time. And not only that, it's actually made me start thinking more about the idea of the metaverse that Mark Zuckerberg, for whatever reason, just keeps pushing, despite their hardware and software not being there yet. Now, I'm probably going to make a whole follow-up video later on talking about this. This headset does not really replace a monitor yet, and it's not exactly good for working in the metaverse or VR. But there's a lot of experiments I've done where I felt closer to wanting to do stuff in VR full time, including what I do daily for work, than I did in the Quest Pro. Yeah. And again, I think it goes back to comfort, but I think more than anything, it goes to the next thing, which we're going to talk about displays. Again, this thing uses micro OLED displays. They are 1 inch in diagonal and they must be magnified by a consistently big amount to get that almost or at least around 90 degrees FOV, depending on your face shape and all those factors. I did do an accurate measurement of my FOV, and while it's definitely less than Quest 2, I never felt hugely a difference when I wear it, but it is, you can see here, not, it's around that 90 degrees both ways advertised here. But the stereo overlap is pretty good. They do cant the displays a bit to give a little bit more wider FOV, but the biggest thing is the screen door effect. Now, I'm not going to just go ahead and say that the screen door effect is completely removed, but this is the closest I've ever felt in a while to not being able to see the screen door effect. The only time I see it with these displays and optics is pretty much with edges and aliasing of text. And not only that, because it's micro OLED, you get the rich colors and contrasts and blacks in it. Not only that, you know that Mura problem that everyone has been talking about for HTC Vive, Rift CV1, even more recently the PSVR 2? Due to the way that micro OLED is built, which is on silicon monocrystalline backplanes, the voltage is spread evenly across the displays, so you have zero, I repeat, zero Mura using a micro OLED headset, and it just adds to that clarity. Now, they do advertise an RGB stripe pixel pattern, and while that's technically true, I do want to go into a little more detail about that. So each pixel does have a red, green, blue subpixel, but it's a special type of RGB stripe, which is kind of referred to as pi stripe in the industry. It's the same sort of design that even the Apple Watch uses, and the manufacturer for these displays do it, which makes sense. Again, you can't really tell that. Everything looks super clear, super crisp. Pixel fill ratio feels really good. So what's the issue, Brad? You said there were some issues with this display and in this optics setup. Well, the biggest issues with the displays themselves is they don't get bright enough. This might be shocking because if you look up these displays on the manufacturer's websites, they advertise they get up to 1800 nits or candelas per meter square, typical of the display's power, which is around the same sort of brightness that you're seeing for all the LCD paired with the pancake lenses now. But there's one problem that OLED has compared to those LCD, and with using pancake, you have to do one thing. You have to polarize the light before you can even think of using pancake lenses. And LCD light is already polarized, so when you see that nits advertised for an LCD display, that is already a much higher starting point before the nits get to your eye than OLED, which is non-polarized light. So you lose a big chunk of that already by polarizing the light just before it goes into the optics system. Now, pancake lenses as well, they bounce light around and you lose a lot of light from that. So again, let's say you lose 40% from polarization, 40 to 60% just from using a pancake lens. And then finally, whatever else goes on to the duty cycle of the display, which is the persistence. You have to sort of run a certain level of persistence, a black frame insertion for a display to remove that persistence blur, or because you're constantly looking around. If you move your head a lot, your eyes are counter-rotating and you have displays strapped to your face. So that's how the industry has been getting past it with the sort of low duty cycle, the high black frame insertion. And while the OLED pixels during the on times of the black frame insertion are always the same sort of emission, that actual amount of black frame insertion kind of tells how much your eyes are actually getting or feeling how bright things are. So it's a weird balance. They have to balance the polarization, they have to balance the pancake lenses, they have to balance the duty cycle. And this is actually my biggest problem with the HMD. It's not bright to your eyes. In fact, the Pico 4 gets around 60 nits to your eye at 100%. We did some measurements of this. And this does the same. 100% brightness, 60 nits to your eye. But the persistence, unfortunately, at that 100% brightness that is pretty much decided by BigScreen themselves. While it does hit 60 nits to the eye, same as Pico 4, the persistence is much higher. In fact, it's the same persistence as the PSVR 2, which, as you might know, I had a lot of issue with personally. And yeah, it's very unfortunate because for me, I prioritize head motion clarity over most things. And I've been actually dimming this headset further to 0% all the time, which is a very low nits to eye rating once you do that. If this headset did not have such a good facial gasket that closed off all the light, this would probably be very unusable for me because my eyes would just not be able to adjust depending on whether I have the lights on, turned off, or there's daylight outside my window. But because of this actual facial gasket, it's very usable. And when this thing is running at 0%, even though it's super low and my eyes do adjust, it's not as bright as I would love it to be. But the head motion clarity, super freaking good because OLED also benefits from a super low response time. And you do feel that. Not only do you feel that because it's such a light headset, you move your head faster and you don't feel the shoebox shifting around your head. So it's a really unfortunate trade-off that BigScreen cannot really fix because they're kind of limited to what I would call off-the-shelf displays. They did the best they can. I mean, it's still a really good experience even if it's dimmer than what I'm used to, using usually an index or an LCD display much higher. For example, Quest 2, Quest Pro index at 100% is 100 nits to eye. Only Pico 4 is 60 nits to high at 100%. So it will be weird for some people and maybe a deal breaker for some, but I have to communicate that. Now there's some other issues. I remember in my last video I talked about how pancake lens inherently give reflections based on high contrast scenarios. I gave the infamous jellyfish example where there's a lot of blue jellyfish floating around in a black pool of water. And I would see reflections kind of repeated over and over again. I didn't think they were going to fix that, but they did in sort of a interesting way. They clearly added some sort of coating to not completely remove it because I don't think you can completely remove that from this pancake optics system, but they muted it a bunch to the point where it doesn't look like repeating images, but it looks like glare. So especially as you get to the outside, the sort of edges of your vision, anything in high contrast will look like these sort of God rays or glare of the things you're seeing in these only high contrast areas. When everything's full bright or whether it's a fully lit area, you don't see it. But ironically, if you want to watch a video player in the dark, for example, ironically from BigScreen, you are going to notice that glare. And especially if you run the brightness higher, you're going to notice it more, in my opinion. Running the brightness super low like I do because I cannot handle higher persistence, it's not as big of a deal, but it's still pretty okay. I got kind of used to it compared to the persistence thing. So if you're used to an index, you probably can get used to this. There's another sort of issue with the optics. It's not edge-to-edge clarity fully. In fact, there's sort of blurring as you go out to the edges, and depending on the way that the actual facial gasket is printed, I actually had an issue for the first couple of weeks I was using it because you just want to put this on and it'll mesh to your face perfectly and you'll hopefully get in the sweet spot. That is their big thing. They want everyone that gets this custom molded print to be able to just put it on and you're just automatically in the sweet spot, which is pretty not big because the lenses are not big, right? There was a point where I was pretty nervous because I would spend a lot of time in VR chat, for example, and everyone knows there's an infamous mic icon that is on the bottom left of your UI or screen all the time. And I ended up wanting to turn that off most of the time because the way I was wearing it as intended made it like this blurry mess in the edge of my peripheral vision, and I did not like that at all. Now, eventually later in the week, I would sort of shift my headset to a different way, kind of against the recommendation of this facial print, and I realized I wasn't in the sweet spot. And I kind of reported this, and it sounds like that they're making some big tweaks to the facial scan and printing software that they need because there's issues mostly with the nose. And if I was able to shift this thing down lower and make my nose sort of more against the actual hardware rather than the facial pad,
I would be in a better sweet spot. But for this unit, I kind of have to go against it if I want more of that peripheral under vision rather than the sort of higher vision, which most people would probably prefer under vision because that's where your hands are, that's where your full body is. You're not usually looking with your eyes up, you're usually moving your head up. And us as mammals who had ooga booga times and we were always afraid of stepping on snakes or running into scorpions in the grass as we were hunting mammoths, our vision just naturally wants to look down. And they told me that is the intended behavior. They did cant the displays in a certain way so people's under vision would be better. But unfortunately for my unit, I need a new facial pad, but it's going to take a few weeks before they get there. Another problem is audio. It has no built-in audio. They are offering an audio strap for $100 with a sort of more hard-modded strap that just snaps in, and it'll have built-in speakers. That prototype is not ready yet for me to try. I think they're targeting end of April or May to get samples out. So I've been having to deal with figuring out what audio to use. And when you wear something so light, you don't really want to wear big cans or anything that'll double the weight or almost some cases triple the weight of what's on your head. So I opted for some earbuds, Bluetooth earbuds, and I've gotten used to earbuds because of this headset, but it's unfortunate there's not even like an audio pipe, so I don't have to worry about that. Yeah, the audio is still an unfortunate thing. But speaking of audio, this might shock you, but this entire video you've been listening to me, I'm not actually using this studio mic. I'm using the mic built into this HMD on my head. Does that prove it? I hope so. It's a very good microphone. It's probably one of the main reasons I want to switch to using this all the time for especially VR chat other than the comfort, because it's nice to talk to people and them not complaining that there's any popping issue or just it doesn't sound bad, which I can't believe we still have to talk about this in 2023 with headsets releasing to this day, even from multi-billion-dollar companies that still cannot get the microphone right. So this is very social VR friendly. Like honestly, that's what I want to do with this headset. I want to spend hours. I want to spend 10 hours at a time, which I've done a lot this week in VR chat. And I want to sleep in VR because it's the small form factor. Sleeping in VR, by the way, if you're interested, this headset probably prioritizes back head sleepers better than side head sleepers. I personally can sleep on my side with it, but it's not as comfortable as people who can sleep on the back. It's probably amazing if you can, because again, you open up a sleeping world, usually it's all dark, pitch black with maybe stars or things flowing through the wind and it looks fantastic and things just look fantastic. Like honestly, like even though I say all these issues, a lot of things are just dark and black. You go to a rave, you go to a VR chat rave, oh my gosh, you can't get over it. Like every time you just see the outlines, you see the audio link, you see things just get bright and dark and there's no Mura. It's just high contrast, beautiful OLED colors. Not as bright as you would like, but it is still a very good first showing of a micro OLED headset. Now, I just want to talk about a few more things before we end this video. I know I've been ranting about the problems of this headset, but I really don't want people to come off of this video thinking like, I hate this HMD because I'm pointing out all the things. I want to point out those negative things so that people who buy this headset know what they can expect when, like, all the negatives. Because I think the negatives need to be highlighted more than the positives most of the time. This headset is pretty fun to use. And in fact, it's probably the most wow factor headset I've had in a while. Like, you just put it on, you spend a lot of time with it. You just really don't want to leave VR. And that's kind of exemplified. If you're a PC VR enthusiast, you have an Index, you already have the Lighthouse base station, you have the Knuckles, you'll be happy to know this uses only native SteamVR drivers. So it just plugs in, you don't have to install anything else, it just works. And maybe people who don't spend a lot of time with SteamVR or PC VR don't really understand that, but that is just such a like breath of fresh air for me. Things that don't work out, maybe the headset crashes. You don't have to launch an entire whole console again or anything. You can just unplug the USB-C and plug it back in. Now, I didn't have any hardware crashes except with one sort of stress test I was doing by running the displays at 200% and going all white, but that is not something I recommend. You can run the displays at 200%, by the way, but if you really want to test how sensitive you are to persistence, I think that would be a fantastic test, not only to show that, but why persistence is such a big deal for VR. But yeah, they give that option. I'll never use it, but it was funny to see it crash because I think things maybe got too much power delivery, or just the displays couldn't handle that. Speaking of heat, that's kind of another issue with these displays. Again, the one thing the industry is trying super hard for micro LED is, again, to get brighter, because they want people to be higher contrast, more beautiful colors, and high brightness. But also, we want HDR. This uses 8-bit color, which is pretty standard for most VR. It's only really PSVR 2 that takes advantage of 10-bit color, and I do miss that from PSVR 2, by the way. That is still noticeable, that 10-bit color depth, especially for gradients. But this would be pretty much impossible to support that, not even just from the bit color, which, again, it's only 8-bit, but the brightness wouldn't really accentuate that very well. And again, these have to run pretty hot, these displays, to get that lights to your eye, even at the level they're running it at. So this headset does get pretty warm, and you can adjust the fan speed to 100% if you don't notice it. And personally, I don't notice it when I run it 100%. It won't be uncomfortable to your face heat-wise, but when you touch it, it will feel a bit warm. So just a little notable, especially I live in Florida. It's already hot. It feels like summertime. So that is another thing to sort of note. But I really don't know what else to say. It's a fun headset. It is a fun headset, but it's an early adopter's headset. I don't know when we'll get another micro OLED headset, or whether we will get a micro OLED headset from the big players that don't have to worry about off-the-shelf displays. They can do custom designs. There's constantly news and leaks and rumors of all these big companies partnering with Samsung, LG, SK Hynix, Sony, for example. Apple is supposed to be using micro OLED displays built by Sony in their headset to be announced in June. And that's the most current rumor. I do believe it'll happen. But yeah, this is a early adopter headset that are worried that a micro LED headset will not come to PC, and they just want something super comfortable. They want to spend a ton of time VR chat, which is, again, what I've been doing, and it's been a great time. I don't want to go back to my index, but this headset is not perfect, and this is what this video is about. It's a fun headset. If you have the money, you want to do an early adopting thing, I say go for it, as long as you know all the things I said in this video. And it can only get better from here. There's still more revisions to be had. All right, that's it. I want to give a special thanks to all my Patreon subs. As you can see here, especially my mega patrons, which they're all listed here. I could not do this without you and all the kind support. I love doing these kind of videos. This is probably my most favorite video ever. And while I still did get like this sort of pre-review jitters, it was really exciting for me to be able to have a headset that I enjoyed and sort of talk about the issues and the things I really loved about it, and also get supported by you for it. So thank you, bradsmells.com/Patreon. And the next content we'll have is, well, we had a new Steam VR beta come out today. And it was a big one. If you're sad about eye tracking not being in this headset, well, don't worry. Valve has us all covered. Bye.